You're here for the deep dive, and today we're going straight into a subject that might raise an eyebrow or two. Bloody Brazilian knife fighting techniques.
Oh,
This isn't a bestseller you'll find at the airport.
no, definitely not.
It's a privately published book, a collection of hard-earned insights from Uncle Fester, that's Steve Preisler, Rick Kamikaze Nakanama, Pedro Fet Cavalcanti, and Mad Abe, also known as J.R.R. Abraham. These are guys who've, well, they've lived this stuff, right? From
Nice.
martial arts and combat sports to some pretty serious behind-the-scenes work.
Exactly. What's compelling about this source is its raw, unfiltered perspective. These authors aren't just theorizing. They're speaking from a place of experience rooted in a very specific Brazilian reality.
Okay.
Our goal in this deep dive is to pull out the core ideas and maybe some of the more unexpected elements of their approach to knife fighting. We want to give you a real understanding of what they're about without you needing to, dissect the entire book yourself.
Think of this as your rapid download of their key survival strategies. And why should this grab your attention? Well, this book offers a fascinating glimpse into how a particular set of self-defense skills can evolve when people adapt to specific historical and societal pressures. It's a look at how necessity, well, shapes a unique kind of expertise. Okay, so let's start by unpacking this Brazilian context they talk about.
Yeah, what's fascinating right from the start is the deep historical connection between blades and self-defense in Brazil. The authors point out that since its time as a Portuguese colony, the country has often had a powerful elite. And while firearms were appreciated, they were simply beyond the financial reach of most people.
Right, the cost.
Exactly. This economic reality, combined with periods of really strict gun control, especially during the Vargas era and the military dictatorship between 64 and 84,
Yeah.
meant that knives became the accessible survival tools of choice for the average person.
So it wasn't just about not having guns. It sounds like it forced a different kind of ingenuity in self-defense. It's striking that even without access to fancy knives, the book mentions fighters using basic, inexpensive blades. Brazilians developed a high level of skill. This wasn't a hobby. It was often like a matter of staying alive in a country with significant violent crime.
Precisely. And the authors are quite clear about why they wrote this book. They want to share this fail-safe, foolproof fighting and killing system with people in the United States. They see parallels between the historical gun control in Brazil and potential disarmament pressures in the U.S., suggesting that these Brazilian techniques offer valuable insights for self-defense in a world they see as increasingly violent.
Okay. Let's move into the core principles and mindset they lay out. One of the first things that stands out is how they sharply differentiate between a real life-or-death knife fight and training in a controlled environment like a dojo. It's not about fancy moves. It's about the brutal reality of someone trying to end your life.
That's a fundamental point they drive home. The book insists that in a real confrontation, you have to operate under the assumption that your attacker intends to kill you. This immediately shifts the focus away from technique as like a performance and towards survival as the only objective.
Right.
As a result, the methods they advocate are designed to be practical and usable by a wide range of people, regardless of their physical attributes. However, they also stress that constant realistic practice is essential to adapt to the unpredictable nature of threats.
And it's not just about the physical skills. The mental game seems just as crucial, if not more so. They talk about cultivating an unflinching spirit. That sounds intense.
It is, yeah. The authors delve into the psychological battlefield, emphasizing the need to master your fear, your hesitations, and the element of surprise. They stress the importance of overriding your emotional responses and maintaining a laser focus. A key concept here is keeping your attention on cutting the opponent while, critically, avoiding cutting yourself. It's about a very focused and efficient mindset. Ultimately, this book argues that the mental edge, the ability to control fear and maintain focus, is the foundational weapon you bring to any high-stakes situation, not just a knife fight.
They always make this interesting statement that weapons are all the same. What's the thinking behind that?
What's fascinating here is the principle of adaptability they're highlighting. They argue that the core skills you learn with a knife, the angles of attack, the fundamental movements, can be transferred to everyday objects. Something as simple as your keys or a pen can become a viable weapon for thrusting if you understand those underlying principles of how to move and how to target effectively.
Ah, I see.
It's a very practical and resourceful approach to self-defense. So it's less about the specific tool and more about the underlying principles of movement and targeting. That's a powerful idea, being able to turn everyday objects into tools of defense by understanding those core concepts.
And they really emphasize knowing your targets. This isn't just about wildly swinging a blade, it's about a precise understanding of human anatomy.
Exactly. They argue that a knife allows for what they call surgical precision, compared to a firearm, almost literally. A skilled knife fighter, according to the book, needs a deep understanding of human anatomy to achieve the intended outcome with each strike, whether that's to disable, inflict pain for control, or, in a lethal encounter, to cause death. They emphasize targeting major arteries in areas like the neck, arms, and legs for quick effect.
Let's get into some of the specific techniques and concepts they outline. The triangle seems to be a really fundamental idea in their system.
Yes. The triangle is presented as a cornerstone. They describe two versions: the male triangle, which is defensive and used for evasion, and the female triangle, which is offensive and used for attacking and countering. The central idea is to disrupt the opponent's direct line of attack.
Okay, disrupt the line.
Right. The book illustrates this by showing how stepping diagonally, either forward or backward, allows you to get out of the way of their attack and simultaneously set up your own counter.
So it's about creating angles, getting off that straight line of attack, and opening up opportunities. They also talk about the dead side versus the live side of an opponent.
This is a critical tactical concept. When you're using the triangle to move, the book advises getting to the opponent's dead side, which is the side outside of their ability to effectively attack or defend. Conversely, their live side is the side where their dominant hand gives them maximum offensive and defensive capability. Getting to that dead side provides a significant tactical advantage.
Timing is also highlighted as a key element in both launching an attack and defending against one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They emphasize that attacking or defending at the precise moment is crucial for success. They suggest that an experienced fighter will learn to anticipate their opponent's movements, allowing them to exploit those fleeting moments of vulnerability to launch a counterattack. It's all about reading and capitalizing on those small openings.
The book also stresses the importance of knowing the weapon and studying your opponent.
These are interconnected. Understanding the strengths and limitations of different types of knives, they give the example of a dagger being better for thrusting while a kukri is designed for slashing, helps you anticipate what your opponent might be capable of.
Okay.
At the same time, they advise quickly assessing your attacker, their motivations, their stance, the weapon they have, and even their apparent mental state. It's about gathering as much information as possible under extreme pressure.
And they offer a stark piece of advice. Never underestimate your opponent. That sounds like something learned the hard way.
It does. They point out that even experienced fighters can become complacent, especially after numerous encounters. But this overconfidence can be deadly.
Yeah.
Maintaining a state of preparedness and never assuming an opponent is harmless is vital for survival. They also recommend always having a backup weapon, acknowledging that a primary weapon can be lost or disabled during a fight.
Right. Always have a plan B.
Exactly.
They briefly mention 5 main attacking areas in the human body. While we won't go into graphic specifics here, it reinforces that idea of targeted attacks we discussed. Now, the book takes a pretty stark turn when it discusses the reality of knife combat.
Yeah, this section is very direct and doesn't sugarcoat anything. They describe the harsh realities, the sights, the sounds, even the smells of a real knife fight, emphasizing the absolute necessity of being mentally prepared for this sensory overload. They stress that getting cut is a very real possibility, and you have to be ready to continue fighting even if you are injured.
Wow.
There are no timeouts in a life-or-death struggle. Giving up or panicking, they state very plainly, will likely result in death.
The example of the park maniac they use is particularly disturbing, illustrating that even surrendering doesn't guarantee your safety against a truly violent attacker.
That story serves as a brutal reminder that in extreme situations, you cannot count on the compassion of your assailant. The book reiterates that the single most important factor in surviving such an encounter isn't just the knife itself, but the training and, crucially, the mental toughness that allows you to use it effectively.
Let's switch gears a bit and talk about the perspective the book offers on the knife as a tool for self-defense. They seem to actively challenge the notion that knives are exclusively the weapons of criminals.
Yes, they directly address the negative stigma often associated with knives, arguing for their legitimacy as tools for self-protection. They also highlight the everyday practicality of knives, contrasting them with firearms, and suggest that as restrictions on firearms potentially increase, the knife becomes a very viable option for personal defense. They also briefly touch on the long history of knives as essential survival tools for humanity.
The discussion about the physical strength disparity between men and women and how criminals often target those they perceive as frail and distracted is quite blunt.
Yeah, the authors don't shy away from these uncomfortable truths. They state that attackers often rely on superior strength and the element of surprise. They even bring up the racial component in how criminals might select targets, suggesting certain demographics are sometimes viewed as easier to victimize. The hypothetical situation they present of a woman using a knife to defend herself against an attacker powerfully illustrates how a knife can potentially equalize a dangerous power imbalance.
How does the book address using a knife against other types of weapons, or even against someone who is unarmed?
They briefly cover these scenarios. Against an unarmed attacker, a knife can level the playing field, especially if you are facing multiple assailants. Against a firearm, well, the dynamic changes significantly with distance. At very close quarters within arm's reach, a knife might offer a surprise advantage. But beyond about 18 feet, a firearm is clearly the superior weapon.
Makes sense.
Against someone wielding a stick, skill becomes the primary factor, although the stick offers a potential advantage in reach. However, they are very clear that being unarmed against someone with a knife puts you at a severe disadvantage, and running away is almost always the best course of action.
Moving on, the book goes into detail about different types of wounds and targets, which gets into some rather specific territory.
Indeed, they categorize knife wounds into cutting wounds, which can cause pain, bleeding, and restrict movement, especially if they affect muscles, tendons, and blood vessels around joints like the neck, armpit, and pelvis. Contusion wounds, which can be lethal if inflicted on the head or neck. Skinning wounds, which are primarily intended to cause pain and distract the opponent.
Yeah.
And perforation wounds, which carry a significant risk of internal bleeding. They also offer very basic first aid advice for severe injuries like amputation and perforation.
And they mention different kinds of knives, like the karambit and the kukri, as well as the concept of improvised weapons.
Right. The karambit, which originates from Malaysia and has a distinctive curved blade, is noted for its potential in thrusting attacks and its historical association with poison. The kukri, a heavy knife from Nepal, is described as being capable of causing severe slashing damage, potentially leading to amputation or even decapitation due to its weight and design.
Wow.
And the idea of improvised weapons is key to their philosophy of adaptability, highlighting how everyday items like broken bottles, keys, and pens can be used effectively as weapons for thrusting or slashing if you understand the principles of knife fighting.
The book also identifies specific vessels in the body as targets for quickly incapacitating an opponent.
Yes, they list several major arteries: the carotid in the neck, the subclavian near the shoulder, the brachial in the upper arm, the radial in the forearm, and the femoral in the thigh, as key targets, where attacks can rapidly lead to loss of consciousness or death due to significant blood loss.
Let's move to the practical aspects of handling a knife. Grips and stances. How you hold the knife seems absolutely fundamental.
It is, yeah. The book emphasizes that your grip can reveal a lot about your skill level and your intended actions. They describe several common grips, including the saber grip, where the blade points forward, offering good accuracy and reach, but leaving the thumb somewhat exposed.
Okay.
The reverse grip, where the blade points downwards towards your elbow, which is often used for initial slashes followed by thrusts, though it limits your reach. And the foil grip, which offers a different kind of control. They contrast these with less effective grips like the hammer grip, which lacks precision, and the ice pick grip, which significantly restricts your range of motion.
And your stance, I imagine, is crucial for both your stability and your ability to move and generate power.
Exactly. They describe the classical stance, often seen in traditional martial arts, as being less than ideal for knife fighting because it can limit your mobility. They contrast this with stances like having your weapon held back, ready to deploy, and the sneaky stance, where the knife is concealed in a reverse grip, allowing for a surprise attack.
What about the practicalities of carrying and drawing the knife for self-defense in a real-world scenario?
The book touches on several important factors. The size and type of knife you're carrying, whether it has a clip, where on your body you position the carrier for quick access, emphasizing avoiding places like back pockets or where your back might be against a wall.
Right, situational awareness.
The type of clothing you're wearing, and your immediate assessment of the danger. They stress that if you sense a threat is imminent, the best approach is to have the knife already concealed in your hand, as trying to draw it at the last second might be too slow.
The book also includes a section on solo training exercises. What kinds of drills do they recommend for someone practicing on their own?
These solo drills are designed to build your fluidity, agility, and overall control with the knife. They include exercises like the figure eight, practicing cutting in an X pattern, vertical cuts, horizontal cuts, angled cuts in various diagonal directions, and making the C, which focuses on smoothly changing the direction of your cut. They also cover practicing thrusting attacks at different heights and angles. Additionally, they mention slapping your wrist or forearm to quickly change the direction of a cut or thrust, and the cruzada, which is described as a defensive cut aimed at an attacker's arm.
It sounds like a lot of repetition aimed at developing that instinctive muscle memory. What about practicing specific kinds of attacks?
Yes, they outline target-specific practice, including drills for neck slashing using diagonal downward cuts, eye thrusts performed both straight in and with a twisting motion, stomach thrust done straight and in an upward direction, leg slashes using diagonal downward cuts, and groin thrusts directed upwards.
The book then transitions into basic moves and combinations. What's the idea behind learning combinations of movements?
Combinations are introduced as a way to develop a natural flow and build muscle memory so your reactions become more automatic in a high-stress situation. They provide an example of a first combination, which involves 6 defensive movements: high defense, low defense, outside defense, and inside defense.
Partner training seems absolutely essential for developing any real combat skill. How does the book address working with a partner?
They emphasize that training with a partner is critical for developing a sense of distance and timing, practicing how to block and evade attacks, and learning to recognize when you are telegraphing your intended moves.
Okay, avoiding giving it away.
Exactly. They describe a simple drill which has a beginning, middle, and end for practicing both attack and defense. And they also discuss free sparring, which is less restricted and more closely simulates real combat. They even include a simple sequence against firearm attack. Furthermore, they outline an exercise to improve muscle memory for defending against various common knife attacks, such as strikes aimed at the right eye, the left side of the neck, the stomach, the groin, and the legs. And they detail corresponding defensive maneuvers. They strongly recommend eventually progressing from using training knives to real knives under controlled conditions to build psychological preparedness, emphasizing that all training should be approached with the seriousness of real combat where success is paramount.
The book concludes by outlining the key principles of the Sotai system. Can you give us a brief overview of what those principles entail?
Sure. The Sotai system, attributed to Master Nakayama, is based on several core principles. These include economy of movement, maximizing efficiency in your actions; explosion, generating sudden bursts of power; balance, maintaining your stability; speed, acting quickly; timing, attacking at the right moment; rhythm, developing a natural flow in your movements; continuous flow, linking techniques together smoothly;
Okay.
reading the opponent, anticipating their actions; accuracy, targeting effectively; power, generating sufficient force; pain as a control mechanism, using pain to disrupt your opponent; adaptation of technique, adjusting your approach as visited; changing techniques when ineffective, not being rigid in your approach; and versatility, being able to apply the principles in various situations.
Finally, the book offers a section on common errors to avoid, which is always valuable advice.
Yes, they list several common mistakes they've observed, such as showing your knife too early, telegraphing your intended movements, using predictable attack patterns, attacking in a linear fashion without lateral movement, being tense and not relaxed, initially attacking the leg, making a thrust your first attack, and gripping the blade too tightly for control.
Ah, interesting.
They end with a very important warning. To substimate your opponent can be lethal, meaning never underestimate anyone who is armed with a knife.
Well, that was a comprehensive deep dive into bloody Brazilian knife fighting techniques. It's clear that this book provides a very distinct and intense perspective on knife-based self-defense, one that has definitely been shaped by the unique historical and social circumstances in Brazil.
Indeed. As you can see, this is more than just a collection of techniques. It's a complete philosophy that emphasizes a specific mindset, the importance of adaptability, and a very direct efficiency that comes from, well, a place of necessity. We've only touched on the key aspects, but hopefully you now have a solid grasp of the core ideas presented in this rather unique work.
So as you go about your day, consider this. How might these principles of adaptability, mental toughness, and truly understanding your tools, whatever those might be in your life, apply to the challenges you face beyond just physical confrontations? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we encourage you to further consider the implications of these perhaps unexpected survival tools of choice.